Number of things to go over with here. Don't get behind me. So, believe it or not, this cabin, the majority of it was built in the 1770s. This is one of the oldest cabins around, except that, and this is not the original location. When it was first built, it was 2 stories tall and wide, twice as wide. And it stood for 200 years. And it just got more and more dilapidated. And somebody took it down, a family member took it down, took it to Georgia, stored it for 20 years. Nothing happened there. So a group got together and they came back and they built this cabin here out of what was left. But there were some significant events that did happen here, which we're going to see at our next stop. You know, there was the Battle of Dunlop's defeat ended in this cabin. Now this is the Hill Templeton Dragoon cabin, and I think Samuel Hill was the second one to own this cabin. He lived in Orangeburg. He was a merchant in Orangeburg, and he pulled up stakes in Orangeburg and came here to the backcountry of South Carolina. Now, at this time, this right here was 20,000 acres, a 20,000 acre tract that was called, it was named after the royal governor at that time, who was Boone. This was Boonesboro. Boonesboro Township was right here. There were 10 townships throughout South Carolina that the British colonial government set up. One of them is a Huguenot township down in McCormick County. Perrysburg was one. The only township that's still in existence today is Orangeburg. But why was the British colonial government, and these lands were set up, you could stake your claim, and on whatever claim you had, and Samuel, this property was originally on about 300 acres, I believe. You had to pay rent on that property for 2 years. This is one of the ways that the programs went, and I assume this is the way that it happened here in Boonesboro. So you paid rent on that property for 2 years. And 2 years later, a fellow would come around, an inspector, he'd come around and look at your property and see if you had made suitable improvements. Maybe a barn and a log cabin, 50 acres plowed or something like that. And if you had met the qualifications, then you could quit your rent. And it was called the Quit Rents program. So that's how some of these settlements occurred. So why in the world would the British colonial government want to have settlers on 20,000 acres right here? And the reason is 1 or 2 miles up that way, if not even closer than that, was Cherokee territory. That line was established in the Treaty of Charleston in 1763, where a line from DeWitt's Corner, which is right down the road about 5 miles or so. A point from there going to the southwest at a 45-degree angle to the Savannah River, northeast at the same angle to the middle of the Reedy River. And that established the southern border of the Cherokee territory. And that line is still in existence today. It's the border between Abbeville and Anderson County and between Lawrence County and Greenville County. So that was set up in 1763, or surveyed in 1765 and 1766 by John Pickens, who was Andrew Pickens' younger brother. So the other feature, so this is right on the edge of the Cherokee territory. But the other factor is the Cherokee Path, which runs from Kiowee, which was the Cherokee lower town capital, all the way down to King Street in Charleston. That's the Cherokee Path. And the Cherokee Path is there because it follows the watershed of the Savannah River and the Santee River. It's the top ridge going all the way down through the state of South Carolina. And the advantage is it crosses no rivers. Crosses no rivers. Y'all know the Cherokee Path. You drive it frequently. It's Interstate 26. From Columbia to Charleston, that follows the route of the Cherokee Path. So, and what the coastal elite down in Charleston wanted was protection from heathen Native Americans coming down from the backcountry in the mountains and, you know, committing depredations and stealing horses and things like that. So this was put slap dab right on the Cherokee Path, right next to the Cherokee territory. And if the Cherokees ever did go on a warpath, which they did twice, and that's not counting the numerous other little, you know, incidents that happened all along the way, they don't make it down to the coast where those guys get bothered. Right here, these settlers here are referred to as meat shields. Meat shields. So, you know, this is, in that cabin is where the Battle of Dunlop's defeat occurred. And this story was written up and held for well over 200 years. And it was written up by Hugh McCall, who was the son of James McCall. We've talked about James McCall several times. He was at this battle. He was at Rutledge Ford. He was at Long Canes. He led the mounted militia at Hammond's Old Store. So, and Hugh McCall was 15 years old when his father died. And he had stories that his father's veterans would talk to him about. And he wrote them up, and they were considered gospel for 200 years. And what Hugh McCall describes is a battle that for 200 years has been called the Battle of Beatty's Mill in McCormick County. Well, folks, there has never been, is not, never was, never will be a Beatty's Mill in McCormick County or anywhere else. There was no Beatty's Mill. But, and, you know, people, oh, well, it just matter, we'll find it soon enough, you know, that's a creek right there. I think they had a mill on it. There are references to this battle from the pension applications that were written in 1832. In 1832, you could apply for a pension for your service in the 50 years later in the American Revolution, which meant that the people writing these things are the ones that were 16, 17 years old while the revolution was occurring. And there's 6 or 7, 10 references to this battle, and every one of them gives a different location. Hogskin Creek, Little River, Long Canes Creek, and people have been driving themselves crazy trying to figure out where this battle occurred. And there are people who have given certain interpretations to where they thought this battle occurred that are just digging in their heels until the actual battlefield was absolutely located by the South Carolina Battleground Trust. So the way this battleground was found was through the research of Nancy Lindroth, who's a charming Southern lady. She lives in Augusta. She spent 20 years trying to track down where the battle occurred. And she looked through all the Patriot accounts and everything, and she was just as scattered and confused as everybody else about what was going on. Until she decided to go over to London and look at the Loyalist pension application that Samuel Hill filled out. And from Samuel Hill, this is the Hill Templeton Drake house, Samuel Hill bought this house in the 1770s or so. And he moved here, and he fought as a Loyalist, stationed out of 96. And when she got his pension application information, she was able to narrow down, and then she started tracing down the deeds, you know, who owned this, and she realized that it was this particular cabin that, you know, was being referred to. And that's how she determined where the battlefield was, which we're going to see next. But I did definitely want you to see this cabin. And Miss Jenny, what did I leave out?
Not one thing other than it's been a long road. Whoa! And I mean, literally, the renovator just finished. He's got to come back and get these two sacks. Going to put them in a, but they put the final old tin back, and we do plan in maybe February or March to do this again. This tour, yeah. And I've got books. Have I ever given you any of the books, the Boonesboro books that the Boonesboro Society did?
No, I don't have that.
Okay, well, I've got 2 different books. All this, Mr. Newell Bowie back in 1992. And we have a historical marker down the way at that little place to eat. Yeah, citing Boonesboro. But anyway, this has been, tons of people have studied this. And then when Nancy found this in London, this was the cat's meow. I've got an original picture of the original 2-story cabin from the Drakes.
I've got that here. We need to go check that out.
Okay, and then, but anyway, I'll hush because we need to get down the road.
Folks, right there at the battlefield. That's the battlefield. We recovered rifle balls, musket balls, buttons, buckles, all the accoutrements of wartime battle. Now, you know, Nancy had found where the home place was, which is the next place we'll see, and there's not a lot to see there, but that is where the battle ended. We feel like the battle started, or John Allison feels like that. He is the leading researcher for battlefields in the state of South Carolina, which means he's a leading researcher in the United States, because South Carolina is leading the way in this. And John Allison and his crew of volunteer men, professional men, most of them are retired, some archaeologists, but professors, and John's an investment counselor, that sort of thing.
Right. When you say it's the battlefield, you talking about right here, or where the house is, or all of that?
All of it.
Okay.
And this battlefield continues for another 100 yards up that way.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay? But this is where we found the majority of the artifacts.
Wow.
And well, that's because of all that's gone on modern-wise and everything. Where the actual house was is today a mechanic shop with 10,000 nuts and bolts and screws and everything else laying everywhere. And so,
Ding, ding, ding.
nice people, but we couldn't, you know, you can't investigate that. So, what happened here? See, what I was talking about earlier at Rutledge Ford was in December of 1780. And I kind of finished that with Hammond's Old Store on December the 31st, 1780, and then the Battle of Fort Williams. Hammond's Old Store was December 30th. Fort Williams was December 31st. Those 2 battles in Lawrence County, with the militia being slaughtered. The next battle after that was Cowpens. And by this time, Andrew Pickens, because he's got his home burned down, he is in Daniel Morgan's camp. And Daniel, even though Andrew Pickens had laid down his arms, and some people give major criticism to Andrew Pickens for that, But now he's come back into the Patriot cause, and Daniel Morgan, who had never met him before, but he's got so much respect for Andrew Pickens and the battles that he won up until this time. He puts him in charge of the Patriot militia at Cowpens. Because of that overwhelming, incredible slaughter at Hammond's old store, Patriots started flocking in to Morgan's camp. Morgan's was charged with spiriting up the people, and nothing spirited up the people like the Battle of Hammond's old store. And there were 1,000 militiamen, Patriot militiamen, that came into Morgan's camp. He started out with 1,000 men. Now he's got 2,000 men. Samuel Hammond's there. He's in the skirmish line. James McCall is there. James McCall and William Washington fought so well at Hammond's old store that now William Washington, he was given an allotment of 40 extra swords. And he's got his 80 Continental Light Dragoons already armed. So he gives those swords to the most capable men he could possibly think of, and that's James McCall and his hand-picked militia. So now at Cowpens, Washington has an auxiliary cavalry force of James McCall and mounted militiamen, now armed with swords and swords only. And those people made an incredible contribution to the fight at Cowpens. And it's because of what happened up at Hammond's old store is a big part of that. After that battle where all those Tories got slaughtered, while the Patriots are bringing in 1,000 at Cowpens, on the British side, Tarleton has only able to garner the support of 50 Loyalist militiamen. So that was a 1,000 man difference right there. After the Battle of Cowpens, which was an overwhelming victory, 500 of the 71st Regiment of Foot was captured. These are the best men in the British Army. They're captured at Cowpens, and Daniel Morgan now wants to whisk them away up to the prison camps in Virginia. You do not want those men back in the fight. And who does he assign to guard those men as the army is traveling up into Virginia? Daniel Morgan, he left shortly after the battle because he had serious illnesses, sciatica, hemorrhoids, stuff like that. He couldn't ride a horse. So he leaves, and now Nathaniel Greene is in charge of the army, and he wants to get to Virginia to resupply. Virginia was the breadbasket of the Revolution. The best horses, the freshest horses were in Virginia. So, all kinds of victuals and everything else. This is the race to the Dan. And the race to the Dan is one of the most brilliant examples of generalship in the entire Revolutionary War in the history of America. Because Nathaniel Greene did so well in screening his army as he was able to cross the Dan River and get into Virginia. So Andrew Pickens in the South Carolina militia, and then the General Davidson of the North Carolina militia got killed at Calvin's Ford on the race to the Dan. Now the North Carolina militia doesn't have a leader, so Nathaniel Greene appoints Andrew Pickens to now be in charge of the North Carolina militia and the South Carolina militia. And their job was to guard those prisoners. They were on the far western flank. They were as far away from Cornwallis as they could get, and as they were moving up to Virginia, and Cornwallis was right on their tail. Cornwallis wanted those prisoners. That's what he was going for. Greene was going to, restock. So now Andrew Pickens and the South Carolina militia is 300 miles from here. Militia don't do that. Militia are designed for home protection. But Pickens and his men were up there. So if the Patriot militia is up in North Carolina, Virginia border, and the Loyalists down here in the 96 stronghold, how wide open is the backcountry of South Carolina? So Andrew Pickens says to Nathaniel Greene, he said, hey, I've gone far enough, we got to get back to South Carolina. And Nathaniel Greene says, okay, that's fine. You go ahead and come on back. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse was March the 15th, 1781. Andrew Pickens and the South Carolina militia were not in that battle. They were coming back here. And they were coming back here to rectify what was going on now in the backcountry, because again, now the plundering starts all over again because there's nobody to stop them. And I told you that Elijah Clarke was wounded in the Battle of Long Canes. Seriously, he was out for several months, but finally, as Pickens is coming back, Clarke does, he's better now, and he joins up with Pickens and McCall, and they continue to come on down into the backcountry of South Carolina. Well, in the meantime, there's plundering Tories leaving from 96. Excuse me. And the head of this plundering group is James Dunlop. He's a Queen's Ranger. He is a enforcer for the British in the backcountry of South Carolina. He was instrumental in winning the Battle of Earl's Ford, which is another battlefield that Wayne found for us. He led that successful British attack. He had joined up with Patrick Ferguson as Patrick Ferguson was heading up to North Carolina to chastise the Overmountain men. And James Dunlop was with them. And there was one battle that was before Kings Mountain, and that was a battle of Cane Creek, about 10 or 12 miles this side of Morganton. And James McCall was wounded in that battle. Not James McCall, James Dunlop was wounded in that battle. And he was taken to Gilberttown, where he was, Gilberttown wasn't a town, it was just a big house. But it was like courthouse, and after the Revolutionary War, it was courthouse and center and everything. But now you look at it today, and it's just like this. This is what Gilberttown looks like. You can see, parts of where the battle occurred. But James Dunlop was there recuperating from his wound from Cane Creek, and he missed Kings Mountain. Lucky for him. And while James Dunlop was in Gilberttown and feeling a little bit better, he started taking liberties with the female population. And he engendered severe hatred for what he was doing up there. Well, so he left Gilberttown, came back into eventually the 96 district, 96 fort. And now he's leading foraging parties through here. And he's going to the home of Samuel Hill, who was under his command, Loyalist. Samuel Hill knew all about this area here in Boonesboro, and together they were raiding the Patriot homes and, leaving the Loyalist neighbors alone. That's what they did back then. And James Dunlop is leading 76 men. He actually had some mounted dragoons with him, but when this action first started, those dragoons ran away. I don't know if you could call them dragoons, but he had some support that actually ran away when this battle first started. And when the battle started, it was James McCall and Elijah Clarke. Elijah Clarke was on equal footing with Pickens, Marion, and Sumter. We had the three best militia generals in the country, but Elijah Clarke, he's right up there with them. And he and James McCall, hero after hero, incredible feats at cow pens. And we could write a whole book on James McCall's exploits. especially during the first and the second Cherokee War. But they had, I can't remember exactly how many men they had. They may have had about 100 each. They had more men than Dunlop here, but not a whole lot more. And McCall went one way and Clarke went the other, and they had surrounded those Tories that were here camped in this particular area. And this is where the battle took place. This is where, from the surrounding hills, the Patriot militia was firing in musket balls and rifle balls and shotgun pellets into this area. And there were about 30 artifacts recovered right there. And they've been sitting there for 225 years, 245
So they
years.
approached from that direction.
They surrounded these guys. And I think, you know, they came around like that.
Is there a spring perhaps right over here?
Well, that's Long
There is.
Cane Creek, Long Cane Creek. And we're going to walk up to it, and I'll be talking in detail about that. But while we're mentioning Long Cane Creek, we know that the Cherokee path came through here. We don't exactly know. But when you look at this field right here, you can see little outlines. Now, I believe the road was over there because there's a one-lane bridge. We'll be able to see the remnants of that when we get to look at Long Cane Creek. But this spot where Samuel Hill put his house up on the hill with the 360-degree view, intersecting Long Cane Creek and the Cherokee Path, that is prime backcountry South Carolina property. And that's why this area was settled. You know, the Long Cane, why was that river called Long Canes? It's because the river cane there grew 20 and 30 feet tall. And when you see river cane that tall, you know that you were looking at lush, fertile ground. Everywhere, and the Cherokees, the Native Americans, taught the settlers this. Anywhere that river cane grew, corn would thrive. River cane and corn are in the same family. So there were hundreds of thousands of acres of river cane throughout the entire southeast. And now there's just a few thousand acres of it. And the reason that there's hardly any river cane left anymore is because it was all plowed under or burned off, because that's where you planted your corn. And where you planted corn, I mean, it would thrive in those areas. So at this point, we're going to walk up and we'll go where Long Cane Creek crosses. You know, this was a big victory. There was, of the 76 men, 43 of them were killed, or 34 were captured, or vice versa, one or the other. But it was an overwhelming victory. And so, you know, Elijah Clarke and James McCall had, you know, just excelled during this battle. 6 weeks after this battle, James McCall, the bravest, most athletic, strongest militia colonel that we had, 35 years old, he's dead. And he's not dead from combat. He's dead from smallpox. There's so much disease that was going on during this whole time. And as many foes as James McCall conquered, he could not conquer smallpox. So James Dunlop and 30 men, you know, were captured. In that house up there, we feel like what happened was the battle started here, and then the remaining Loyalists went to Samuel Hill's house, and that's where the battle ended. That's where Samuel Hill was shot through the arm, and that's where James Dunlop was wounded, and those men were captured. And then they were taken up to the prison camps in Virginia. And on the way up to the prison camps in Virginia, there's a little community, a little settlement called Gilberttown. And now James Dunlop is in Gilberttown as a wounded prisoner. And there's about 5 of them set in upstairs in, I guess it's the Gilbert's house. I mean, it's almost like a fortress. But they were in an upstairs bedroom. And at midnight, the door burst open. And an over-mountain man named Cobb took a pistol and he went straight towards James Dunlop and he shot him right there. And he went and he left and he went out the room. Well, about 5 minutes later, they came in to see what was the status of James Dunlop, and he was still alive. So they shot him again. And they shot him, and it set his bed on fire. But his roommates put the fire out, and there's James Dunlop just sitting there. The next day, about 2 o'clock, they were going to load up, and they were going to go back to Virginia. And they go and they look at Dunlop, and he is still alive. So they took him and they propped him up on the bed, and they took a rifle and they loaded up a double shot of powder, and they took that thing and they shot him, and he went clean through his body, and that was the end of James Dunlop. Those people in Gilberttown were not going to have any more to do with James Dunlop.
But we don't know where he's buried.
He's probably fed to the hogs.
That's exactly what I was